My Catholic Roots is an online formation series sponsored by the Militia Immaculata, an ecclesial movement founded by St. Maximilian Kolbe. This week's topic is entitled, How Should I Live? Peter Kraft, an American philosopher and Catholic apologist, once wrote that to answer the question, How should I live? One has to determine what is the most precious thing in life, or, in other words, what is the greatest possible good? What is of the highest value? Jesus' answer to those questions is from the Gospel of Matthew. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and most important commandment. The second most important commandment is like it. Love your neighbor as you love yourself.
How should I live my life? That is a very good question. In today's world, there are a lot of answers floating around out there. People say, do whatever makes you feel good. There's no right or wrong. There's no truth. So, just do what makes you happy. And in one sense, there's some truth to that, because we all want to be happy. And so it speaks to that desire we have in our heart to be happy. But at the same time, we see sin in our world. We see divorce, suicide, depression, alcoholism. People struggle with sin and addictions. So we can't deny the reality that we encounter in our life either. And in the Catholic tradition, we have what we call the 7 capital sins. They're called capital because they're the foundation or the first part of sin that engenders all of the other sins that build up this edifice of sin that we have in our life. These capital sins are covetousness or avarice, lust, anger, pride, envy, gluttony, and sloth. Covetousness or avariceness. This is a disordered desire for material possessions. For someone who's obsessed with getting a new car, or a bigger house, or more money, a bigger paycheck. For someone who is totally making their whole life centered around material possessions, worldly goods, which are good in themselves, but disordered when they become the means and point of our life. Then there's lust, which is a disordered desire for sexual pleasure. Depending on what state of life we're in, there are different parameters to lust and to how we can sin. Married people, there are celibate people, single people, and there are religious. And each one of us has to integrate chastity and work against lust in our life. Then there's anger. Anger is a disordered desire for revenge. Vengeance is the Lord's, we read in the Bible. And when someone does something to us that's unjust, we have a legitimate reaction of anger. But if we act out of that, and we take revenge on the person our way, instead of surrendering to God and trusting that He will have His vengeance, then that's the disorder. After anger, we see pride. Pride is the mother of all vices. It is the lie that we tell ourselves that I am the source of my own being, I am the source of my own goodness, I am the source of what's right and what's wrong. That's pride. And that is the disorder because God is the source of truth. God is the source of being. God is the source of right and wrong. After pride, there's envy. Envy is a disordered desire for the good that another has. Something we want, and we'll do anything we can to have it or destroy it. Instead of affirming that goodness in the other person, we see it and we want to get rid of it. Then there's gluttony. Gluttony is a disordered desire for food and drink. Now, it's good to have 1 donut, or 2 donuts even, and it's good to have 1 drink or 2. But to have 20 drinks, or to have 20 donuts, that's where the disorder comes in. And not to mention, we feel it physically with stomach aches, and we get sick. Then there's sloth. Sloth is an inertia in us that lets us be content with this world, with the things that we see around us, with our own faults, our own failures, and we see this, and we do nothing to try to overcome it. We do not accept the joy that God wants to give us through the sacraments and from heaven, in prayer and in the Bible. So that's sloth, a contentment with this world and our own faults in it. So now that we have these 7 capital sins, are we just stuck in the mud down here by ourselves? No. St. Paul writes, God has given to us every spiritual blessing in the heavens through Jesus Christ. And what are those spiritual blessings? Well, the Catholic tradition also calls those spiritual blessings the virtues. The three theological virtues are faith, hope, and charity, or love. Then there are four cardinal virtues. There's justice, prudence, temperance, and fortitude, or courage. But I would like to focus on the virtues that counteract the 7 vices, the 7 capital sins that we just talked about. So to start off with, to counter covetousness or avarice, we practice liberality or generosity. And liberality in the sense of free. We open our hands to give people freely, to be generous, to give of ourselves, not just our possessions, but our very self to another person, to counteract that desire to take and to consume, which our society is always telling us to do. You're a consumer, not a giver. But the truth is, you are a giver, not a consumer. Then to counteract lust, which many of us struggle with, chastity is a virtue that God gives to us through Jesus Christ. Chastity is the integration of our sexuality with our personhood. So, for me, I would integrate my maleness with my Ryanness. And that's how I practice chastity. And the way I practice chastity is unique to who I am, but very similar to other men. And just the way a woman practices chastity is unique to herself, but similar to other women. Then to counteract anger, God has given us the virtue of meekness or gentleness. Meekness is not doormathood. I'm not telling you to go out and let people push you around and tell you what to do, and you stop standing up for yourself. No, that's no fun. You're just going to get depressed and sad. It's gentleness. It's acknowledging the anger you feel. Do not repress it. Acknowledge it because you feel it. But to be gentle, to use the energy that you feel and to channel it into gentleness towards that person who makes you feel angry instead of taking revenge. Then to counteract pride, which is the mother of all the vices, we have the mother of all of these virtues, humility. St. John Vianney said, the number one virtue that anyone can practice is humility, 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 because it goes against the number one vice. So, humility is the acknowledgement of who I am. It's the acknowledging that I'm weak and good, that it's possible for me to be weak and good, which is what the world doesn't tell us. The world says if you're weak, you're bad. But humility acknowledges that I am weak and yet still good. Then to counteract envy, we have kindness. Envy is a desire to destroy the good of another. Kindness works against that and says, I'm going to affirm the good of another through a kind action, a kind word, through a prayer. Then there's gluttony, disordered desire for food and drink. We have temperance, self-control, the middle way. Not too little food, not too much food, just enough for what I need to keep me alive, to keep me happy, healthy, and holy. Then sloth. To counteract sloth, God gives us diligence as a virtue. We practice diligence. We see our faults. We see our failures. And we do not be discouraged. We do not fall to despair. We do not become content. We have hope in Jesus Christ that He will give us every spiritual blessing in the heavens. And we work against our faults, and we seek heaven. We look above this earth. So we're looking at actions and desires. Remember, vices are disordered desires, and they lead to our actions. Actions come from what we desire. Our desires come from what we think about. What do you think about? Human thought is creative. Whatever you think will become. You want to be a great piano player? Think about playing the piano. You want to be a great basketball player? Think about playing basketball. And it will happen. Where do our thoughts come from, though? Our thoughts come from what we love. When a young man's in love with a woman, that's all he can think about is that woman. What do you love? That's what you think about. What you think about is what you desire. What you desire is what you do. But that love is the key. How do we get to that center, that core of our heart? Jesus Christ, God is love. And we can receive Jesus in the Eucharist every day in Mass. And in the Eucharist, we not only sacrifice and worship, we worship is what we do. We sacrifice and worship to God. And to worship is what changes what we love. Because in worship, we surrender what we love, and Jesus replaces that love with Himself. So if I love lust, if I love anger, if I love gluttony, I surrender that to Jesus in worship. And Jesus replaces that with Himself, who is love, which changes my thoughts, which changes my desires, which changes my actions. And that's how we should live our life.
So I come crawling, Lord, humbled you should enter through my heart's door, to meet you face to face, to find my purpose in your loving embrace. I feel weak and I feel scared of what I know I could be, but you showed me what to do. You said love one another as I love you. So I will say your name, Jesus, I will pray, pray your name, Jesus. Hold me, Jesus, don't let me go. Love me, Jesus, love me, Jesus.